Frame 3. What do we mean when we use the expression internal combustion engine? Well, internal means inside or enclosed. Combustion is the act of burning. Therefore, an internal combustion engine is an engine that burns fuel internally. Frame 4. Basically, the internal combustion engine is a container into which we put fuel and air, compress them, and start them burning. The mixture expands rapidly while burning and pushes outward in all directions. This push can be used to move one part of the engine, the piston, and the resulting movement can then be transmitted to the drivetrain by means of the connecting rod. Frame 5. An internal combustion engine is a device that converts chemical energy into mechanical energy to do work. As this illustration shows, several sets of elements are needed to develop a simple engine. They are, first, air and fuel under compression, followed by combustion. Second, reciprocating motion changing to rotary motion. And third, a repeat sequence called an engine cycle, such as a 2- or 4-stroke cycle, for example. Frame 6. Air, fuel, and combustion are the three basic ingredients needed to produce chemical energy in the engine. Air is needed to combine with the fuel to give it oxygen for fast burning. Also, air has two other properties that affect the operation of the engine. Frame 7. Air has the property of being compressible. For example, 1 cubic foot of air, as shown here, can be packed into 1 cubic inch or less. Frame 8. Air also has the property of becoming hot when it is compressed. The molecules of air rub against each other and produce heat. Frame 9. The fuel used to produce chemical energy in the engine must mix readily with air and ignite easily. The three fuels we will cover are gasoline, LP gas, and diesel oil. All of them ignite easily and are readily broken down or atomized. Why do we want to atomize the fuel? Because it makes each particle of fuel contact enough air to burn completely. It is the oxygen in the air that combines with the fuel when it ignites and burns during combustion. Frame 10. What is important is how fast the fuel burns. The force must be explosive to get full power from the engine. If a container of gasoline is ignited in calm outside air, it burns rather lazily. This is because the air contacts only the surface of the fuel. To make the fuel burn faster, we can do two things. We can heat up the fuel by compressing it, and we can atomize the fuel so it can mix with air. Frame 11. Too powerful an explosion will destroy an engine, since the combustion takes place in a closed container. But we can control the rate of burning by regulating the rate at which we compress the air in order to heat it up, or by the amount of fuel we use, or by the volatility of the fuel. That is, the ease with which it will ignite. Frame 12. As we saw earlier, an engine uses two forms of motion to transmit energy. They are reciprocating motion, which is up and down or back and forth motion, and rotary motion, which is circular motion around a point. The engine starts with reciprocating motion and develops rotary motion. Frame 13. 4 basic mechanical parts are needed to make the engine work. They are the cylinder, the piston, the connecting rod, and the crankshaft. The piston and cylinder are mated parts, fitted very close, so that the piston glides easily in the cylinder with little clearance on the sides. In the cylinder is where the reciprocating motion begins. Frame 14. The connecting rod is the link that transmits the motion of the piston to the crankshaft. A simple crankshaft has a section offset from the center line of the shaft, so that it acts as a crank to produce rotary motion. Frame 15. The motion is basically the same as when we pedal a bicycle. Each of our legs is like a connecting rod, while the pedal crank and sprocket are like the crankshaft. Frame 16. Here you see how the reciprocating motion of the piston is converted into a useful rotary motion of the crankshaft. The stroke of the piston is the distance it travels in the cylinder. This distance is determined by the offset portion of the crankshaft. Frame 17. The modern gasoline engine works best when about 15 parts of air are mixed with 1 part of fuel. Frame 18. Compression ratios tell us how much the fuel-air mixture is compressed by volume. When the piston is at the bottom of its stroke, let's say the amount the cylinder will hold is 8 pints. As we move the piston to the top of its stroke and again fill the cylinder, it holds only 1 pint. The ratio is 8 to 1. Air in this engine is compressed to 1/8 of its former volume by the moving piston. Frame 19. For an engine to operate, a definite series of events must occur in sequence. First is the intake, when the cylinder is filled with a combustible mixture. Second, this mixture is compressed into a smaller space. Third, the mixture is ignited and caused to expand, producing power. Fourth, the burned gases are removed from the cylinder. To produce continued power, the engine must repeat this sequence over and over again. One complete series of these 4 events in an engine is called a cycle. Now turn this record over and continue. Frame 20. Most engines have one of 2 types of cycles, namely a 2-stroke cycle or a 4-stroke cycle. A 2-stroke cycle engine is commonly called a 2-cycle engine, and a 4-stroke cycle engine is commonly called a 4-cycle engine. In the 2-stroke cycle or 2-cycle engine, each cycle is composed of 2 strokes of the piston, 1 up and 1 down. Then the cycle starts over again. One complete cycle, composed of 2 strokes, takes place during 1 revolution of the crankshaft. Frame 21. In the 4-stroke cycle or 4-cycle engine, each cycle is composed of 4 strokes of the piston, 2 up and 2 down. Then the cycle starts over again. 1 complete cycle takes place during 2 revolutions of the crankshaft. Intake and power are the 2 downstrokes. Compression and exhaust are the 2 upstrokes. Most engines today operate on the 4-stroke cycle principle. Frame 22. Valves must be incorporated into the engine design in order to let the fuel-air mixture in and the exhaust gas out. A group of interacting parts make up what is called the valve train. They include the timing gears, the camshaft, the push rods, the rocker arms, and valves. Frame 23. A camshaft changes rotary motion back into reciprocating motion by means of camshaft lobes with a specially designed eccentric shape. As the high point of each lobe comes around, it moves the push rod upward to open the valve. When the low point of each lobe comes around, the valve closes with the help of the valve spring. Frame 24. While the crankshaft makes 2 revolutions during the cycle, the camshaft makes 1 revolution. A set of timing gears keeps the camshaft synchronized with the crankshaft, so that the valves will open and close in perfect timing for maximum efficiency on each stroke. Frame 25. At the start of the intake stroke, one eccentric lobe of the camshaft is at its high point, moving the intake valve push rod up and opening the intake valve. At the same time, the exhaust valve for that cylinder is closed. Frame 26. The intake stroke, therefore, begins with the intake valve open, the exhaust valve closed, and the piston at the top of the cylinder. At the end of the intake stroke, the piston is at the bottom of the cylinder. Frame 27. As the piston moves down during the intake stroke, the fuel-air mixture is drawn past the open intake valve into the cylinder. Frame 28. The intake valve closes at the end of the intake stroke. The exhaust valve remains closed, and the valves are in this position as the compression stroke begins. Frame 29. The compression stroke starts with the piston at the bottom of the cylinder. The cylinder is already filled with the fuel-air mixture. The piston rises upward to compress the fuel-air mixture. Frame 30. Since the intake and exhaust valves are closed, the cylinder is sealed, and there is no escape for the fuel-air mixture. The mixture is compressed to a fraction of its original volume. Frame 31. As the power stroke begins, the valves are in a closed position, so that the cylinder remains a sealed container. This ensures that when ignition takes place, all the force will be exerted on the piston. Frame 32. The power stroke, shown in this illustration, begins when the piston reaches the top of the cylinder and the fuel-air mixture is ignited by a spark from the spark plug. Frame 33. As the fuel-air mixture burns and expands, it forces the piston downward, producing reciprocating motion. Frame 34. After the end of the power stroke, when the piston starts upward again, the exhaust valve opens to let out the burned gases. Frame 35. During the exhaust stroke, the upward motion of the piston pushes out all the burned gases. Frame 36. As the piston reaches the top of the cylinder, the exhaust gases will be completely expelled. The exhaust valve will close all the way, and the cylinder will be ready for a new 4-stroke cycle of intake, compression, power, and exhaust. Frame 37. So far, we have treated the engine as if it were only a basic one-cylinder design. A single cylinder gives only one power impulse in each complete revolution of the crankshaft in a 2-cycle engine, and only one power impulse in every 2 revolutions of the crankshaft in a 4-cycle engine. Frame 38. For a more continuous flow of power, modern engines use 4, 6, 8, or more cylinders. The same series of cycles that you have just seen takes place in each cylinder. The power strokes follow each other so closely that there is a continuous and smooth delivery of power to the crankshaft. Frame 39. For example, in a typical 4-stroke cycle engine having 6 cylinders, the cranks on the crankshaft are set 120 degrees apart. The cranks for cylinders 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 3 and 4 are in line with each other. When 6 is in firing position, 1 is at the exhaust position, and vice versa. Frame 40. A heavy flywheel is attached to the rear of the crankshaft and gives the crankshaft momentum to return the pistons to the tops of the cylinders after each power stroke. Weights are placed on the crankshaft to balance it. Frame 41. In this film, we put together a basic engine. A number of auxiliary systems are, of course, required for complete operation, such as the fuel system, the electrical system, the lubrication system, and the cooling system. We'll discuss these systems in other films. Be sure to review this film at least once to make sure you have the basic concepts firmly in your mind.